Amendment was specifically written to protect the citizenship of formerly enslaved Black people. As a legal expert, he is surely aware of the unambiguous language contained in the 14th Amendment. Yes, the affirming of the citizenship for formerly enslaved Black people was the impetus for the establishment of the 14th Amendment, but it actually went much farther than that. The Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment reads as follows: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. That language is pretty unambiguous, but people who oppose the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment love nothing more than creating hair-splitting, tedious legal arguments around what the framers meant by subject to the jurisdiction.
We had a very unfortunate decision in the Supreme Court concerning birthright. It was close, but a very, very unfortunate decision. So we're making adjustments because it's very unfair. This was done for a different reason. This was done right after the Civil War. This was for the babies of slaves. And what's happening now, people are building businesses around it. From wealthy people are building businesses around birthright citizenship. That's not the way it's supposed to work. It's a disgrace. They're buying their way in.
Birthright citizenship and the 14th Amendment has always been about foundational Black Americans. Case closed, no debate. But they try to find loopholes in it the same way they try to find loopholes in the civil rights era, the same way they try to find loopholes in our rallies, our protests, and our marches, the same way they're trying to find loopholes right now with reparations. Everything that immigrants do has to be funneled through what Black Americans have created. Everything from the United States of America to a reparations paycheck. Birthright citizenship is for foundational Black Americans. Immigrants want to get in on it. Civil rights were for foundational Black Americans. Immigrants want to get in on it. Reparations is for foundational Black Americans. Immigrants want to get in on it. There's this whole system that has been created where you take things that Black Americans have created and then you try to hand it off to all these other groups. And when foundational Black Americans say hail to the gnaw and we snatch it back because we delineate, everybody cries foul. Well, your ass gonna be shedding some tethered tears because we don't give a damn. This is our house. This is our time, and what we say goes. And if we shut you down in the process, you just going to be shut down and you got to live with it. If you name everything that Black Americans have done, if you name everything Black Americans have created, it all goes back to the excellence of our country. But don't nobody ever want to put the spotlight on that. That's fine, because we're going to put the spotlight on it. And everybody knows our spotlight shines brightest amongst everybody's. And all we doing, family, is that we putting a twist on it. Each brother and sister, king, queen, goddess, and God, and we doing it our way. They cannot see us, not at all. They can try, but they're going to fail. And everybody...
Bringing up Black American descendants of slaves while trying to end birthright citizenship, saying that it was originally intended for Black American slaves and non-immigrants. And the person who is saying this is someone who directly benefits from birthright citizenship. It is a very obvious attempt to triangulate immigrants and Black Americans against one another. This is another attempt to create division and cause chaos and discord to keep people fighting amongst another and distracted from what is actually the issue. Also, we are not the only country that has birthright citizenship. The vast majority of the countries in the Americas, including Canada and Mexico, have birthright citizenship, along with other countries in the Caribbean. A lot of these countries instituted birthright citizenship as they were getting their independence to entice European immigrants to come to their countries. This is the time, now more than ever. A lot of people need to develop their critical thinking skills, critical listening skills, and their discernment. If something you are reading or seeing is making you feel very strongly, it's eliciting a very strong emotional reactions from you. Before you respond, before you repost, before you tag, before you share, do your research. Look it up yourself.
Black Americans need to be heavily invested in this birthright citizenship conversation because we only have citizenship as a result of the 14th Amendment. And I know that there are segments of Black Americans that believe that we grew here like cornstalk. But if you're paying attention to the Supreme Court conversations that have been had today, they do not give a damn about indigeneity and have gone so far as to question Native folks. And if tribal indigenous folks can claim U.S. citizenship on their own land. I did a video last year, particularly talking about the Dred Scott decision of 1857. And if you're watching this on TikTok, you can look at my caption for that video. And I was talking about how the Dred Scott decision, which was a Supreme Court decision, tells you what you need to know about how they feel about us being here. Chief Justice Robert B. Taney said that Black people had no rights that a white man was bound to respect. That the Declaration of Independence naming that all men were created equal was not for us. And that ultimately servitude was our place as Black people in the United States of America. Then you can absolutely recognize that no matter how many times they talk about illegals gaining citizenship, they don't want Black people to have it either. I find it odd that in this time, Black people will be trusting anything white men have to say, when the reason we have a whole ass Juneteenth is because people in Galveston, Texas weren't even told that they were emancipated. And also, it's not a matter of them stripping away our citizenship in order to ship us wherever around the world. It is their goal to have us in a continuum of servitude.
And we're not going to let it happen.
Birthright citizenship was for the descendants of slaves, not immigrant babies. How hard is this to comprehend? Black Americans, you have allowed this to go on so long to the point these people are fighting against you politically. You reap what you sow.
Second Black U.S. Supreme Court justice, and he takes this stance. Let's read it together. Blacks were entitled to citizenship because they were Americans. I bet the Founding Fathers didn't agree with that. Let's continue. They had no other homeland, owed no allegiance to any foreign power, and were subject to no other authority. Let's dissect that for a second. If the 14th Amendment was only intended for former slaves, descendants of another foreign power, therefore they did have a place from which they came, although whether they wanted to go back is up for debate. Nonetheless, your words contradict your argument. He goes on to say the same cannot be said for the children of foreign temporary visitors. So the distinction between slaves and immigrants, refugees, is that one was brought by force and the other is a willing visitor? Nigga, you got a doctorate in jurisprudence. You don't even believe this bullshit. He goes on to say that his colleagues that affirm the decision repurposed the 14th Amendment for their own goodwill. I would say the same was the case when the 14th was added.
Something just changed in the American immigration debate, and this time the history behind the argument is impossible to ignore. President Donald Trump has signed a new executive order targeting birthright citizenship and what his administration described as birth tourism and other situations involving foreign nationals. And now a question is dominating the conversation. Was birthright citizenship originally connected to the children of formerly enslaved Americans? And what happens when the same constitutional principle is applied to today's immigration system? That is where this story gets extremely interesting.
What are your thoughts?
As a Black American, if you feel like these immigration situations don't affect you, that's completely fine. However, after slavery, after we were freed, we were fighting for humanity, yes, but overall, we were fighting for citizenship. And Black Americans have been second-class citizens in this country since we were freed. So the reason why immigration things affects us as Black Americans is because when they're talking about birthright citizenship and we're talking about citizenship in general, we are the blueprint in this country for citizenship outside of white people, outside of white men. So no matter what, when we're talking about citizenship in this country, we are the centers of that because all of the citizenship laws and things that have been created have been heavily influenced by the Black American identity. So as a Black American, with them saying, hey, birthright citizenship is up for grabs right now, that affects us because number one, think about the fact that a lot of people in the older generation were lucky to even have a birth certificate, and some of them don't have the documents to prove that they are citizens. So if they are taking away birthright citizenship when you're having a baby, you have to prove your citizenship in order for your child to receive citizenship, even if you are a born and bred, true, full-blooded American. So, Black Americans, sure, immigration. When you hear immigration, we didn't immigrate here, but when you hear citizenship, pay attention. That's us.
In regards to this birthright citizenship stuff, I want to be clear. I never really talked about this and never really got down into the subject of this because I didn't understand what was occurring and why it was occurring. At the end of the day, the constitutional clause that talks about birthright citizenship 100% was meant to include, or was 100% meant to refer to, the children of prisoners of war. Okay, it does not mean, and it did not mean at that time, that if somebody from Libya comes to America, that when they have a child, that they have birthright citizenship. It never did mean that, because at that time when that law was put into place, there were only indigenous Americans and Caucasians, or Europeans rather. There wasn't a whole bunch of other people here. So it at the time, it addressed the conversation of the time, of the moment, right? So the issue that I have with immigrants coming in and trying to use that as like a catch-all type of umbrella clause for them is that they then are now pushing that means that they have the same rights as those who are indigenous to this land, one, which is Black Americans, who I'm specifically talking about, and those who actually created the system with which we currently live in, which are the people who conquered us at the end of the day. That's what happened, right? Right? So the issue comes in when they are, and see, this is what they're doing. They are trying to say that Black people are immigrants and we're immigrants, so we should be able to be treated and get the same rights as Black people. And it's just not the truth. We are not immigrants. We were already here. So the issue with this conversation is that it separates us from our birthright and our inheritance to the land, okay? And to, to benefit from the system, that was created from on our backs. And it really was. And so when the immigrants come here and they say, oh, this place was built on the backs of immigrants. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. So Black people, you got to pay attention to this, because actually at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is they are trying to say that Black people are similar to immigrants, that we're the same, and we're not. We were indigenous to the land. We could never be the same. And I think we need to get a little bit ahead of this at the end of the day. I think instead of us even trying to play on this level field, because we are indigenous to the land, we have more capability and more power than we even know. And we need to start setting the tone for that. We need to start setting our own ground rules, because at the end of the day, it's getting out of hand. People who are coming from other places think that they have the same rights that you have. No, you have courtesies. There's a difference, right? You have courtesies. We've given you a courtesy. We've extended you a courtesy, okay? And we've given you some additional privileges, but those are not rights that you have. If you're an immigrant, that's just it. You're an immigrant. That means that we have given you courtesy. We have given you the courtesy to allow you to do certain things. That doesn't mean that you come over here and you start making the rules.
Let's get one thing straight. This isn't an executive order that says Black Americans get citizenship and immigrants don't. That is not what the document says. What Trump signed on August 6 targets specific categories of people who, according to the administration, fall outside the historical exemption to birthright citizenship. The order specifically addresses children connected to foreign government employees, people classified under the administration definitions of alien enemies, certain commercial arrangements involving birth tourism and U.S. territories. And that distinction matters. Because the real fight here is over who qualifies for American citizenship at birth. Now, let's talk about the Black Americans, why Black Americans are paying attention. The 14th Amendment was adopted after the Civil War and contains the Citizenship Clause, which says people born or naturalized in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction are citizens. That constitutional provision has become critically important in establishing citizenship for formerly enslaved people and their descendants. And Trump himself referenced this history when discussing the policy, saying the provision was created after the Civil War and referring specifically to the babies of slaves. So when Americans hear this debate today, they are not just hearing another immigration argument, they are hearing an argument about American citizenship, constitutional law, and Black American history. And here is where the political debate gets complicated. For generations, birthright citizenship has generally meant that being born on American soil carries enormous legal significance. But immigration has changed dramatically, and the United States as citizens, permanent residents, temporary visa holders, undocumented immigrants, asylum seekers, foreign government personnel, and people who enter specifically for short-term purpose. Trump's administration is arguing that the citizenship system should distinguish between legitimate residents and attempts to use American birth to obtain citizenship. That is the policy arrangement, and whether someone agrees with it or not, that is what the debate is actually about. And this is where the outrage comes in. For immigrant families, the concern isn't necessarily limited to people who are undocumented. There are families living in America under different immigration categories, including temporary statuses, visas, and other forms of legal presence. Some parents may have children born in the United States, so when the government begins changing the interpretation of birthright citizenship, families immediately start asking, what happens to my child? What happens to my family's immigration status? What happens if federal agencies refuse to recognize citizenship in a situation covered by the order? Those questions explain why immigration advocates are pushing back so aggressively, and legal challenges are already expected. But from another perspective, some Black Americans are looking at this through a completely different historical lens. They see a citizenship principle that became especially significant after slavery and the Civil War. They see generations of Black Americans whose connection to American citizenship isn't based on a recent immigration decision. Their ancestors were already here, they were enslaved here, they fought for freedom here, and constitutional amendments after the Civil War fundamentally changed their legal status as Americans. So that history gives the conversation a completely different dimension. But here is something commentators need to understand. This isn't simply a Black Americans versus immigrant, and it is not accurate to assume every immigrant is undocumented or that every immigrant family is affected in exactly the same way. The order itself focuses on specific categories, and the legal question is bigger than one ethnic group. It's about the interpretation of 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship, federal immigration policy, executive power, and the authority of the courts. And that is why this story becomes much bigger than the original announcement. So at the end of the day, President Trump is presenting this as an effort to protect the value of American citizenship and stop his administration calls abuses of immigration system. Critics say the executive branch is going too far and attempting to redefine a constitutional guarantee, and now the courts are going to have a major role in determining what happens next. But one thing is already clear: birthright citizenship is no longer just an immigration issue. It is a debate about the American history, constitutional rights, a national identity, the future of US immigration policy. And for Black Americans, the historical connection to the 14th Amendment makes this debate particularly significant. So the question now isn't whether people are outraged. The question is, what will the courts decide? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, and kindly remember to keep it respectful. If you want breakdowns like this, hit the subscribe button and join our family. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.